This is an amazing group. We have folks filling the balcony. So welcome to the 2013 keynote session. Especially as this is our 40th anniversary, I was very excited to celebrate with a very unique and special keynote session to celebrate the pioneers of the animation arts. The opportunity arose early in the planning process to do a collaboration with the Academy of Motion Arts and Sciences. I was absolutely thrilled to have this relationship. We'd like to especially thank Disney legend Alice Davis, who's here with us today. She gave her approval to allow us to use our keynote as part of the Marc Davis Lecture Series. It's named after her late husband, Marc Davis. This lecture series is managed by the Academy, and it provides a forum for all film experts to explore challenges in creating as well as producing and executing feature films. To kick off the session here, I'd like to introduce Randy Haberkamp. Randy is from the Academy, and he's going to come to the stage and introduce all of our panelists.
Good morning. The Academy is really honored to have the Marc Davis Lecture here at SIGGRAPH's as SIGGRAPH's keynote today. The Academy, of course, has had arts and sciences in its name for 85 years, so the idea of left brain, right brain is part of our DNA as well. First, I want to thank Academy member Ron Diamond of Acme Filmworks for not only helping us to produce this event, but also for advising the Academy Film Archive on making sure that the student work of the animation community is preserved by our Academy Film Archive to serve as inspiration and insight for future filmmakers. We're going to show you some brief snippets from our panelists' student work. You'll also be able to see the entire films today at the Daytime Selects at 4:30 in room 207. So I suspect that you'll get into each clip just as it shuts off. I suspect we may hear some just like we heard at the rehearsal. So that's your chance to see the complete films. Since 1994, the Academy has been presenting the Marc Davis Animation Celebration, and Marc Davis was our first presenter. He's known, of course, for many of his characters, not the least of which are Tinker Bell and Cruella de Vil, but also for his work as an Imagineer at Disneyland. The first lecture was given the year of the Lion King, which, reflecting back now, is regarded as a real resurgence of the popularity and artistic success of theatrical animated motion pictures. And before Toy Story could signal a dramatic Marc Davis is often remembered as one of Walt Disney's 9 old men. The 9 animators he was referring to at that time were in their 40s, and it was a joking reference to President Franklin Roosevelt's calling the Supreme Court 9 old men, all too aged to remember and recognize a new idea. The Disney 9, of course, went on to produce many years of classic animation before they grew into the actual 9 old men that they referred to with age. For animation historians, Disney's 9 old men are now remembered as pillars of feature animation, and many of them, including Marc Davis, mentored many of the panelists on our stage today, which is the focus of our presentation. Ironically and symbolically, we ended up with 9 animated feature directors with us today, though they really don't qualify yet as 9 old men. But having them with us for the first Marc Davis Animation Lecture to be held outside the Academy's Beverly Hills headquarters seemed appropriate as we celebrate Marc's centennial year, with his lovely wife Alice here to witness it all, who is, Alice wanted to be an animator, but at the time, women couldn't be animators. Even though we have 9 men on stage today, we tried diligently to get some women to join us. They were all busy, and we hope to have them here at another time. So advances have been made on many fronts, and we continue to work in that regard. I want to thank SIGGRAPH for having us here, and in the meantime, I hope you'll check this out and tell your friends about this keynote, which will be available on YouTube and at Oscars.org. Our first guest is Kirk Wise. Kirk, come on out, please. Kirk earned his first paycheck for drawing at age 7 after his mother submitted his sketch to the San Francisco Chronicle's Junior Art Champion contest. Following graduation from CalArts, he contributed animation and storyboarding to various projects, including the Disney animated features The Great Mouse Detective and Brave Little Toaster. He worked with fellow animator Gary Truesdale to read story credits on the features Oliver and Company and The Lion King, and the two would go on to direct Beauty and the Beast and Hunchback of Notre Dame and Atlantis: The Lost Empire. More recently, he served as story consultant on the Sony Pictures animated feature Open Season, oversaw the early development of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and served as an executive producer on the Disney nature documentary Oceans. But here is a scene from Kirk's student film, Childproof. Our next guest is David Silverman. David? David received his MFA from UCLA in 1983. He worked in freelance illustration and animation until landing a job on the Tracy Ullman Show, where The Simpsons got their start as short segments. He animated all 48 shorts and directed many of the episodes, becoming supervising animation director as well as producer of The Simpsons in 1992. He then went on to DreamWorks to co-direct The Road to El Dorado, to Pixar to co-direct Monsters, Inc., and to Blue Sky to do writing and storyboarding for Ice Age and Robots. He returned to the series The Simpsons at the end of 2003 as supervising director and directed The Simpsons movie in 2007 and received an Oscar nomination for the animated short Maggie Simpson in The Longest Daycare this year. But here's a glimpse of David's student film, The Strange Case of Mr. Donnybrook's Boredom.
Pretty soon, he began to count sheep. Mrs. Donnybrook began to count sheep, too. After a while, Mr. Donnybrook said,
"Hey, you're counting my sheep. Stop counting my sheep."
Why, the very idea. I suppose I know my own sheep, don't I?
How?
They're cattle. That's how.
Our next guest is Henry Selick. Henry studied painting, drawing, photography, sculpture, and printmaking at Syracuse University. While taking an animation class, he completed his first film, Tube Tales, which received a nomination for a Student Academy Award in 1976. He enrolled at CalArts and then began training at Disney on The Fox and the Hound, but left in 1981 to sequence direct on the cutout animated feature Twice Upon a Time. He then directed several stop-motion commercials, creating storyboards for Return to Oz and Nutcracker. He was selected to direct Nightmare Before Christmas, which was followed by the stop-motion feature James and the Giant Peach and Monkey Bone, a mix of live action and stop motion. His stop-motion animation work can also be seen in The Sea Creatures of the Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou. Most recently, Selick served as director, producer, screenwriter, and production designer for the Oscar-nominated animated feature film, Coraline. Henry? Here's a clip from his student film, Seepage. Next, Chris Sanders. Chris, come on out. Chris served as the cartoonist for the Arvada High School newspaper before enrolling CalArts animation program. After graduation, he went to work for Marvel Productions and then Disney Studios. He worked as a story artist on The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King before being made head of story on Mulan. Chris wrote, boarded, and directed Lilo and Stitch with Dean DeBlois and earned an Oscar nomination for animated feature film. In 2006, Chris joined DreamWorks Animation, where he directed the Oscar-nominated How to Train Your Dragon, and most recently, The Croods. Chris Sanders. And here's a scene from Chris's student film, Fun with Father.
I'm sorry I have to do this. But you've proven again and again that you can't function in society. Little murderers, like yourselves, cannot go unpunished forever. So I have taken it upon myself to...
What you doing, Dad?
Mike Mitchell graduated from CalArts and began work as a writer and storyboard artist on feature animated films and television series, including Ants, Shrek 2, Shrek the Third, episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants, and Monsters vs. Aliens. His live-action feature film credits include directing Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, Surviving Christmas, Sky High, and Inland Empire. Mitchell has directed the animated features Shrek Forever After and Alvin and the Chipmunks Chipwrecked, and is currently in production on the animated feature Trolls for DreamWorks. Mike Mitchell. Here's a scene from Mike's student film, A Franny's Christmas.
But Franny learned at school that day that there's no Santa, much to her dismay. It was Gloria Ostriger that first told her. Gloria was Franny's friend who was 2 years older.
I thought you knew.
Gloria Ostriger sneered.
It's your parents, not the fat guy in the silly white beard.
It was then Fran's schoolmates began to tease her. They laughed and pointed, which did not please her.
Kevin Lima studied acting and theater design at Emerson College in Boston before enrolling in the CalArts animation program. After graduating, he took assignments designing characters and animating for the independently produced feature The Brave Little Toaster, before joining Walt Disney Feature Animation in 1987. For the following 6 years, he worked in one capacity or another of each of Disney's next 5 animated features, Oliver and Company, The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast. He then took the director's chair on a Goofy movie, which was followed by Tarzan, and his first live-action movie, 102 Dalmatians. His most recent film, Enchanted, combined a mix of traditionally animated live-action and computer-generated characters. Currently, Kevin is in production on an animated Bollywood musical for DreamWorks Animation. Kevin Lima. Lima. I'm from Ohio, where it's Lima. You know, what can I say? Yes, Glee, which is not like Lima. Anyway, let's take a look at Kevin's student film, Let's Misbehave. Eric Goldberg is a director, designer, and animator whose early forays into Super 8 filmmaking earned him a full scholarship to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. He began his career as an assistant animator on Richard Williams' Raggedy Ann and Andy, a musical adventure. After co-founding Pizzazz Pictures, a commercial studio, he joined Disney and began work as a supervising animator on The Wisecracking Genie in Aladdin. He went on to co-direct Pocahontas, animate the feisty Phil in Hercules, and then directed, wrote, and animated 2 sequences for Fantasia 2000, Carnival of the Animals and Rhapsody in Blue. Recently, Goldberg served as supervising animator of the trumpet-playing alligator Louie in the hand-drawn feature The Princess and the Frog. Eric Goldberg. Here's a scene from Eric's student film, For Sale.
$6,000 says it's yours.
All right. 6,000 for what?
Why, this, my friend, is whatever you want land. One snap of the fingers brings whatever locale you desire. Paris. The Wild West.
Ron Clements started in Disney's animation talent development program shortly out of high school in 1974. Mentoring under Disney legend Frank Thomas, he became an animator on The Rescuers, Pete's Dragon, and a supervising animator on The Fox and the Hound. He became a director on The Great Mouse Detective, and partnering with longtime collaborator John Musker, co-wrote and co-directed The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, Treasure Planet, and The Princess and the Frog. Clements received Oscar nominations for Treasure Planet and The Princess and the Frog. Please welcome Ron Clements. Here's a scene from Ron's early work, Shades of Sherlock Holmes.
I think I'm beginning to understand. This isn't a gravestone at all, but a cleverly designed secret passage. Are you coming, old boy?
Why, that is, oh, I suppose so.
Pete Docter won a Student Academy Award for his film Next Door in 1992. Upon graduation from Cal Arts, he began working at Pixar, where he served as animator and co-wrote the original story on Toy Story, served as a storyboard artist on A Bug's Life, and co-crafted the original story for Toy Story 2. In 2001, he turned his attention to Monsters, Inc., for which he conceived the original story and took the director's chair. Docter received an Oscar for animated feature film for Up, which he co-wrote and directed. He also received Oscar nominations in the Best Original Screenplay category for Toy Story, WALL-E, and Up, animated feature film for Monsters, Inc., and animated short for Mike's New Car. Please welcome Pete Docter. Here's a scene from Pete's Student Academy Award-winning film, Next Door. So, gentlemen, on behalf of the Academy and SIGGRAPH, I want to thank you all for being with us today. Obviously, Animated Feature Directors is kind of a small club, and I'm very proud of the accomplishments that you've had, and want to talk to you, seeing these student films, about where you saw yourself when when you made your student films, and what, looking at it today, you remember about that learning experience and what you've kind of kept with you, what it was that you kept with you, other than perhaps, oh my God, I've got to get better. Yeah. What was it that you were learning at that particular time that served you to make a jump? Does anybody have anything they want to jump in?
Well, I learned I didn't want to be a cell painter, so I learned that pretty quickly. But I think I was in that one. That was actually my first hand drawing animation. I had done clay animation prior to that, and I don't know why I didn't keep up with that, but I think when I got to UCLA, we had to, my plan was to do clay animation, but when we got to UCLA, I had to do this test with my drawings, and I said, hey, look, my drawings are moving. So I got very interested in that, and I just was trying things out. That was sort of the first real experiments I was doing with animation. So yes, I thought I had to get a whole lot better.
I think for me, going in, I thought it was all about drawing, and that's what I was focusing on. And by the time I got out, I realized it's more about acting and storytelling, and so that's what I was sort of figuring out. And it was a great experience showing films in front of audiences, even though today it's sort of embarrassing. But at the time, it was great just to hear what people responded to and what they didn't, and start to hone your storytelling. So
I think I learned how to tell a story in 2 minutes, because that's as long as a small Super 8 reel of film was.
Oh yeah.
So, but that kind of economy has actually held very well for me over the years, to be able to get things to read in very short amounts of time.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, at that point in my life, I was probably only planning no more than 2 months into the future. I didn't have any huge dreams, but I was really just hoping to make short films. I'd seen a lot of films from the Canadian Film Board, which are very inspiring to me. So primarily, I was experimenting. I was trying out all the sorts of animation that existed at the time, drawing, cutout, some stop motion, pushing clay around. So it was a time of exploration, which I still try to bring into any project that I'm up to. I just like to bring stuff to life and see if you can get an emotional response from an audience.
What I was What I was concentrating most on, I remember in my student days, particularly my film Childproof, was trying to understand better and illustrate basic principles of animation. I was trying to have a better understanding of how to make a character walk with a convincing sense of weight. I was trying I was experimenting with squash and stretch and distortions, and I was learning a lot about overlap by choosing a character with a trunk. So it was really, for me, it was an exercise in not only storytelling, but really trying to deepen my understanding of animation principles.
I'd say for me, I wanted to make a movie, and when I was a kid, and animation seemed like a way that you could do it all by yourself, and I didn't have a lot of friends, so it was so I could make a film where I could do the voices, I could paint the backgrounds, I could paint the cells, and I made the cells, I did all that, and I sort of did everything, and I feel like I got it out of my system, which is a good thing, because beyond that, when you're really, animation is a super collaborative sort of work where you work with many, many talented people who do all kinds of things a lot better than you can. And so I think it was good to get that out of my system and then later learn how to collaborate.
But you were doing the film we saw in high school already, and so this was a really early career choice for you.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that early. I wanted to get into animation, I think, when I saw Pinocchio when I was 9 years old. And I don't think that's that unusual. Something sort of inspires people. So I was interested in animation and didn't know much about how to get into it at all, I think, at that time. just sort of looked at books and picked up what you could. And fortunately for me, Disney was actually starting a talent development program in the late 70s, I think. Or actually the early 70s, actually was right after Jungle Book. Shortly after, I think they were thinking of phasing out animation for a while after Walt died, and Jungle Book was a huge success, so they started looking for young people who didn't know anything, that was kind of part of the thing they wanted, because they felt like if you would work somewhere else, they'd have to unteach a lot of things. So they wanted people who were sort of fresh and which was great because the doors were closed at Disney for years and years, and it was just sort of fortuitous timing that they started opening the doors again in the early 70s.
But I bet a lot of us started with a similar sort of lonely nerddom. That would be my guess.
Speak for yourself.
Well, that was true of me.
Anybody relate to that here? Anyway, Mike, you wanted to say?
Oh, for me, it was just, it was a lesson in finishing something, because I found it very easy to talk about all the films I was going to make and everything I was going to do, and that short film represents that it's a lot harder to actually do the film and finish it, complete it. That, and when I worked on that film, when I was animating that summer on it, I taught myself how to hacky sack. And so by the end of that summer, I was really proud of finishing a film, and I had some hacky sack skills. I thought that was like a little bonus that I had.
For me, it was quite the same thing as Mike's. It was really about survival. You know, I was like 21, I think, at the time. And
you didn't have to do a film to graduate, by the way, right?
You didn't. No, but for me, it was about how do I get through 2.5 minutes of film, you know, and be sane at the end of it. So that was really important. It was like, how do I get there? Can I get there? Can I be happy once I've gotten there? And it sort of set up this whole sort of, you know, perfectionism that follows me till today, really.
And you're almost happy.
Are you happy?
Right?
Yeah, I'm happy.
All right.
What's happy?
Forget I am.
I think for myself, it was my first. I didn't know that this was going to serve me well in the future, like with a giant production. But maneuvering around a shortcoming, and in the case of Fun with Father, that little movie I made, I was maneuvering around the fact that I couldn't, and I never could learn how to animate a character walking. So all the cuts in the framing are to avoid showing their feet. And if a character comes, the little cat jumps in really quickly because I couldn't make him walk.
For my short film, I couldn't turn my lead character's head, so she just faces you the whole time. She never turns to the side.
Likewise, I couldn't make my characters walk either, so they were always standing still in the transition. Oh, very artful transition. Yeah, artful.
Well, actually,
they're in bed.
David's solution was even more elegant than that. When he was doing stop motion films, claymation, you know, rather than animating a walk, they just got cut off at the waist, and he would slide them around.
Yeah, like elegant.
And it worked great.
Yeah. Worked out. Walk schmuck.
Works for the Muppets, right? They get to do it.
I stayed up for about 3 days solid finishing my student film, and the last few shots that I completed, I realized I didn't have enough time to fully animate this film, so I had to make some sort of shortcut somewhere. So a scene that I had staged as 2 full figures, I ended up staging as just a couple of hands. It's like I just had the father in close-up hand the bottle of aspirin to the son, all in close-ups of hands, and it looked very cinematic, like I had a good eye for cutting, but it was a total cheat. It was a shortcut so I could get the damn thing done.
Didn't you have to do the same thing in Beauty and the Beast, though?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, God, the hands. It served me well later in life, particularly in one of the big ending numbers of Beauty and the Beast, the mob song. You've got like a whole village of people tromping up the mountain to go kill the beast, and so we cut to hands holding swords, we cut to shadows on the wall, you know, we cut to anything to avoid having to animate 20 characters marching across a background on ones. So these are valuable lessons to learn.
No walking. And one thing, I did have a really great sort of experience in making that film. We showed it because I stupidly had it, painted and the whole thing. But I had a line test of the film. We showed it at the UCLA end of the, semester screening. And it wasn't finished, and it was like getting laughs. And that was a really great experience. I remember coming in kind of like halfway through, and people were just laughing. And I thought, well, that's good. I'd like to do more things like that. Yeah. It was a very kind of out-of-body experience. It's like you were telling a joke, but you weren't actually telling it. You told it like, months ago when you're animating it. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
So when you look at these, and you can talk about other people's films too, or you can talk about yours. I mean, each one of these films to me has a really strong sense of, I can see why you guys are up here. There's this, even though they're student works, I can see a sense of style. They're all very different, but they all have a very strong feeling of somebody who knows, is on the way to knowing what they're doing. So what do you see, or what did people see in your work at that time, or what do you see in the films of the other panelists here that you think indicates something that as an instructor or as somebody coming up, you would say, oh, that's interesting. Anybody?
Well, I remember at CalArts, one of the first things I did was to go look at all the other films that had been done before. And I remember hitting on Chris Sanders, a couple of your films, and thinking, man, this guy is really good, but more than that, he's very unique and specific. And it wasn't just trying to be somebody else and trying to draw like Chuck Jones, or, a lot of people were doing that. He just had a real specific sense of uniqueness that made me gravitate towards him, not just in the drawing, but in the storytellings and the types of films that you were doing. So I thought that was something I still look for today. Like when you go to the movies, you don't want to see some corporate thing. You want to see something that has a strong, unique sensibility from a person that made it, So.
Well, I see in each one that it's like, wow, what's going to happen next? So that's always a very important thing of like, you're compelled by the filmmaking, the storytelling, the acting, and the composition that this is intriguing. And so we just saw clips, and it's like, I need to see all these films because I want to know how does it end? Or how does it begin even? Because it's just so, that's a mark of like, this person is a storyteller. I need to know what's going to happen in the next shot.
I think in many cases you can see our nascent sense of humors coming out in these things too. I mean, I think they all have, well, most of them, they're trying to be funny, have a sense of where some of us got to in later years. And, to echo David, yeah, it's great to actually see somebody laughing, at something that you've produced, and, it was, it means what you're doing is working, like an old vaudevillian. Okay, that joke worked this time, time to laugh. But it was, I think you can see everybody's kind of unique take on things.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll move on. You mentioned Pinocchio. Before we move forward a little bit in your careers, I want to just go back to the germ a little bit one more time. Talk about the films and/or the moment when you if there was one, or moments maybe, where you kind of said, okay, this is what I want to do, or how did you discover the trail that got you to where you are?
Oh boy, I started really early. I mean, obviously, I was one of those kids who, and I'm sure, we're all cut from the same cloth, who grew up watching the Warner Brothers cartoons on Saturday mornings, and watching Wonderful World of Disney on Sundays. Those were like my first exposure to full animation. And I had always loved cartooning, and my original ambition was to be a comic strip artist. But by the time I hit the 5th grade, I started experimenting with making short films, with cutouts and pieces of clay, and my interest started to veer more and more towards filmmaking and away from comic strip art. They sort of traveled on parallel paths for a while, but ultimately, by the time I got to high school, I was determined to learn animation. And through the Preston Blair book, both Preston Blair books, and The Art of Walt Disney by Christopher Finch, And eventually I learned about CalArts, and I was just completely focused on getting into that school, and you know, spent my senior year trying to build a portfolio for it. You know, the film that I submitted as part of my portfolio was absolute crap. But I mean, I'm really glad they didn't pick that one for this particular forum. But I was determined to get in there.
Well, I echo just everything you say. It was a similar upbringing in that. But in addition, my dad was a huge Walt Kelly fan. So when we were kids, I mean like when I was 5 years old, he would read us Walt Kelly. And he'd cool. You know, and he'd do funny voices and things like that. And I loved it. I loved the drawing. I didn't understand half the writing because I was 5, but the drawing was terrific, and my dad's enthusiasm was great. The other thing my parents did, which is rather interesting, is when I was about the same age, they took me and my brother to see a Charlie Chaplin double bill, you know, of Gold Rush and Modern Times. And we both loved it. And I think that, when I look back on it, that probably made an early impression of sort of comedy and pantomime. And likewise, I was interested in being a comic strip artist, but yeah, about the same age, I started diverging and getting more into the idea of doing filmmaking instead. So, but those two things I remember being important.
Yeah, I you know, grew up close to the same time as these folks, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but I saw the same things, but I also, you know, I saw Ray Harryhausen films. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was a stop motion pioneer. He did amazing monsters in films like Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts. Films that, although pretty crude in comparison to the big CG effects of today, they hold up pretty nicely. So I found I was scared and attracted to monsters in animation. So I loved the Cyclops that he created in the swordsman skeletons. In Disney, I particularly loved 101 Dalmatians. Cruella de Vil was my favorite character. Night on Bald Mountain was my favorite part, along with Sorcerer's Apprentice of Fantasia. So I was drawn to fantastic monster, appreciated humor and great design, but a sort of multitude of influences. And then short films from abroad, from Canadian Film Board. There was an animator, Caroline Leaf, who really, she pushed oil paints around under a camera, spent forever, but she did powerful adult stories like The Street was a real influence. So I had an appetite for many different types of animation, but I'd say there was this through line, something dark, more adult, with a sprinkling of humor.
That's cool. I think that, like, I grew up in Colorado, and all the animated films that I loved, I knew they were coming from California, which seemed very, very far away. So I don't think I ever really thought I would ever end up there doing that kind of thing. But I remember I love to draw and I drew little comics and things like that. But I was watching The Wonderful World of Disney, I'm pretty sure, and they showed The Three Caballeros. And there was one sequence from that movie, and that was the sequence, the moment that I really decided I want to try to do this. And that's a little bit that Ward Kimball did. And it's the song, the Three Caballeros song. And it was it was so fun. It was just, and it took advantage of animation, like all the strengths of animation, things come and go, and it's quick and it's ingenious. And I was absolutely thrilled by this thing that I saw. And I still remember how I felt when that finished. My heart was beating fast. And in the days before the internet, I thought, I want to try to be an animator. So I decided to behave as an animator might. And so I tried to find information on what animators do. And so amongst the things I did was I had my grandfather helped me build a light table, and I had really and truly no idea what it was for. But the drawings I normally did on the kitchen table that were flat, now were being done on an angled piece of glass that was lit from the back. So I didn't know what in-betweens or anything. And honestly, it was when I got to CalArts, I couldn't tell anybody that was around me that I didn't know what these things were for. And like we got a really quick lesson in in-betweening, and I was like,
that's what that thing is for. It puts the drawings in between. It's genius, of course. But that was the moment.
Are we going on the line? Is it my turn?
Sure.
I'm from Oklahoma, so I went out to Cal Arts for live action, and my filmmaking sensibility was very silly and goofy. And at the time at Cal Arts, the live action people, they were very serious and David Lynchian and like films about suicide and vampires and grandpa's dying and stuff like that. And I wasn't quite fitting in, and I went to the animation department. And I saw a group of people that were drawing pictures for each other, trading artwork, like it was like a community. And I was like, I got to get it over to this part of the school. And so fortunately, it was Bob Winquist was the dude in charge there. And so I did a quick portfolio that night and like presented it to him. And he barely looked at it. Wonderful, come on over. So, fortunately. But it was like what Pete was talking about when you're looking at his drawings. It was such a community there. It was like everyone was like in the same, like desks were next to each other, and there's like, it was like.
Smells a lot.
Yeah, it was like a sweatshop, but at the time.
It got you ready for real life.
That's right, it did. It got me prepared to be crammed into a room with a bunch of people. But it was cool because you would be around a whole bunch of different styles, but everyone was very sharing. And even if they weren't, like at night, like a stalker, I'd go up and I'd look through your desk, Pete, and I'd like look through Tom McGrath's stuff, what's he working on? And it was just like a really, really cool, like a community. It was like a really cool environment. And that's what got me super jazzed about animation.
My mother tells a story that she took me to go see Jungle Book when I was 7, the original release, and I said after the King Louie sequence, the I Want to Be Like You, that I was going to draw that when I grew up. And she said she thought nothing of it. She said, yeah, great, that's wonderful. We grew up in Rhode Island, we were a pretty poor family, so we didn't really think that we could break out and do anything that was special. So it's funny because I look at it from where I am now and I haven't been able to escape making films about singing monkeys.
That's a good thing. That's a positive thing.
But from there, I just, I went to Emerson College to begin with. I got sidetracked for a moment thinking I would go into the theater. I was a puppeteer growing up, and I was part of a professional company as an apprentice. And I thought, this is really what I want to do. I want to tell stories with puppets. And what I realized from where I am now is that really what I really wanted to do was tell stories in which I could control the things that were on screen. I look back and I realized that there's a little bit of that God complex going on. That's why live action is so tough for me. I don't know how you find it, but.
Oh, it's easy.
Yeah, getting an actor to do what you'd like them to do. But
without posing them,
moving them around. You stand
you
right
can't do
here.
that. You're not supposed to.
Oh, they're crazy about that.
But halfway through that year, I just felt like, and maybe this is it too, I was at school with actors and I couldn't control them. So I thought, what am I doing? I want to be in animation. I've always wanted to do this, and I went on this little sidetrack here, which ended up being a great sidetrack because it helped me later on, moving into the telling live action stories. But I went out to Cal Arts not knowing a soul, not having visited, got off the plane and saw my first palm tree, a little overwhelmed by the whole experience. And from there, it's just always grown. I have this like aching ambition to always do things that I haven't done, which keeps pushing me. And I think it was what pushed me to go and get on that plane and come to California to actually raise my hand and say, I want to be an animation director, and have them all like look at me like I was crazy. And then from there say, I want to do live action, and I'm raising my hand now saying, I want to go do a Broadway show. So, it really comes from that place of just hunger. I've just always hungered for the next thing.
Well, I'm probably older than most of you people here. Thank you. And I remember when I was a kid, TV was still kind of in its infancy. And there was you guys are lucky because in the digital age, you can go on to YouTube, type in practically any animated film in the history of creation and see it. And in those days, you had to find stuff, and the information was very, very little. What we had then was the Disney program, the Art of Animation book by Bob Thomas, and the Woody Woodpecker Show. And I got hooked on that really early because every week Walter Lantz would do a sequence on how animated films were made. See, we put these on the light box here, and this is how we draw Woody. And, you know, and I ate it up with a spoon. And, you know, you're talking about not knowing what a light box is for. Early on, I started doing the 2-page flip animation and eventually graduated to flip books. But I figured out, I don't know how, but I figured out that if I draw it against our plate glass window, that works like a light box. So I did a lot of animation early that way. But I always loved the feeling of animation, the fact that it was larger than life, so exuberant, so fun. And I always wanted to do it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the same thing you said, but I'll say it anyway, because we are probably about the same age. And I watched the Woody Woodpecker Show religiously as well. And my favorite part was that part when Walter Lantz would take you behind the scenes. And it was so fascinating. It was like revealing how a magic trick was done. And animation always seemed magical to me. It was like just really fantastic. And it was, and the Walt Disney program on Sunday nights they used to have would also, once in a while, they would have an episode where they would take you behind the scenes, the tricks of the trades, and you'd see animators at work, you'd see them do their drawings. And as Eric said, it was so hard to find out much about animation. I would go to the library and scour for books. There's basically 3 sources, and there's still very good sources, but you have to find them. There's the Preston Blair book, the Walter T. Foster book. Actually has everything is in that book if you know what it is, but usually you're a kid, you get that book and you don't know what any of it is, so it doesn't communicate, but all the information is actually there. And then there was another book, The Art of Animation, the Bob Thomas book that went into the making of Sleeping Beauty. And I must have checked that out of the library about 20 or 30 times. I should have stolen.
You're the one who had it.
Yes. I should have stolen that book. I mean, I don't know that anyone else ever checked it out. I kept checking it out over and over, but I always returned it. But that was a great book, but that's about it as far as I know.
Bless you. It's me.
And like I say, now there's so much more information available.
For me, it was the Wonderful World of Disney, and every week you'd be like, please be animation, please. Oh, it's Charlie the Lonesome Cougar. Well, watch it anyway.
Sammy, the seal who thought he was a raccoon.
That's right. But I was also lucky enough, I went to this school, I grew up in Bloomington, Minnesota, and they had a program where you could hook up with a local company. And I found this animation firm called Bages Jones. And I don't know why, but they said, sure, come on in, use any of the equipment, talk to any of the guys. And so I just spent my entire high school, as much time as I could there, figuring this stuff out and looking at the videotapes that they had. They had, you know, Oscar Grillo's Reel and a lot of your stuff and Dick Williams and all these commercials, because that's mainly what they did. But it was a great place to learn. And the other cool thing about being at a place like that is it's small enough that it's like a lot of people I talk to want to get into Disney or to Pixar or whatever. And if you can get into a small place, you have a lot more chance to experiment and try things and be a part of really contribute, you know. It's a great place to start.
So I'm going to transition a little bit now. You guys all started when animation in most people's head kind of meant 2D, and it kind of meant maybe cell animation or maybe stop motion, but even that was a difficult thing to do for a long time. So you've also kind of witnessed this transition and this constant change as to what animation means and how the business is regarded. I mean, it was almost on its way out when some of you were coming into it, and yet now it's like one of the hottest things going, and yet it's also in a huge revolution. So could you talk about the changes that you've seen in the industry and how you see the methods of survival that you recommend for people coming into it and dealing with the change of what is still going to be a very much evolutionary process? Yeah. Who wants to go first?
Mike?
What? I'm going to sound like a
Come on.
Well, I'll say it's fantastic. Who knew that animation would be as big as it is now? And even for live action films, there's more animation in those films in live action these days. It's insane. And it's great. And the computer animation, CGI, that's like just a new tool to expand on everything that's been done in the past. And even that's evolving. It seems like every month, like there's newer and new stuff. The only negative thing that I'll say is about it is storyboards are now done on the Cintiq. Is that how it is for everyone?
You don't like that?
Yep. So I don't like it, and I have my reasons before everyone boos me.
All right.
Because it used to be, in the good old days, they'd pin it up, right? And you'd see it all there, and then the person who's pitching the boards is kind of doing a performance in front of a group of people and pitching with what's known as a stick, a pitch and stick. And they'd point to their boards and they'd pitch it, and you do the voices and get to the end. And it was just easy to look at all of it there and like get a feel for the storytelling. And now the artist, the room is dark, the artist is in the back of the room and kind of clicking through their storyboards, right? And inevitably it's like, oh, hold on, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Hang on. And it's just like, oh. And I find myself like an old curmudgeon going, I miss the good old days. Like your voice, you do the voice better.
We actually did that accidentally. There was only a few, like a year or so ago, we had that very problem. We were going through someone's sequence and we were talking about how we saw the whole sequence on a screen and they clicked through it. And I mean, on the good side of it, I think the story person, they feel like they're a little more in control of the rate at which people are looking at it. And so there's a lot of these upsides, it's quick and they can push a button. And
you get your lens flare. You can lens flare on it. Those are fun.
And you don't have to draw the background over and over, which is what was one of my slowest things. But after they had pitched this sequence, we started talking about a change we wanted to make inside the sequence. And we all got a little bit confused, like, no, that happened after he jumped off the cliff. No, dude, that was before he jumped off it. And we started getting to, let's pin it up so we can see it. And so we had somebody pin them all up on those old-fashioned boards. We got all the boards out. And when we came in the room, we were like, this is amazing. Yeah. I can see the whole thing at once. This is incredible. And look, I can change things just like this. I can move it around. So we got to get back to like doing that.
Yeah.
Like, sure, pitch it on the thing, but then have it in the other room so you can go in there and start folding things over and stuff.
Still
like
evolving.
That.
Still evolving.
Yeah. What will they think of next?
I'm with you guys. I really loved, I spent many years in story at Disney, and I really loved just the interactivity of it. I loved how physical the job was. We'd be standing up on chairs and folding drawings back or tearing them off or frantically scribbling new ideas and pinning them over the old ones.
It works your core, too.
Exactly. You got a good workout.
You gotta go up.
And we would be hauling the boards through the hall and lifting them up and getting them ready for pitch mornings at the 6 a.m. meetings with Jeffrey back at Disney. But there was something really exciting about it. It's something that I miss a lot.
Well, plus they'd be hung up in the hall, and I would stop and read these boards. Everybody would. Yeah. And you'd stop and look at somebody else's storyboards. You'd just be there with your coffee and just enjoying that. And that really, I miss that. I miss that sort of inspiration being in the halls all the time.
It's the piece of it that I'm having the most trouble with, because this is my first CG film, is that everything is hidden. All the art is hidden in files, and you have to dig through the computer to find everything. And I really miss the just being able to be inspired by something you happen upon, as opposed to something that you search for.
In fact, I'm a little bit worried now because I think we've all had this experience, I'm guessing, but I've gone into a room to ask about a certain thing. It could be a shot or something, and the person I'm talking to goes, oh, hold on a second. And they go, right. And they write this thing about this long, and they click, and the scene comes up, and I'm like, does anybody else know where that is? Because if he gets hit
what happens if
in the head with a hammer, that's where that is. Are we going to ever find it?
I have the same reaction. Although they're talking now about doing storyboards, I have to see this if this can happen. It's like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, where you can where you will be able soon now to be able to move the sketches around. You can blip them, you can change them, you can draw on one. When that happens, maybe that'll be the best.
It might be next week. Who knows? Maybe there's someone here that knows how to do that.
I just know that we were doing The Simpsons. Really, we're the last holdout of not having it on cells. We're like 2002 was the first time we said, okay, we have to go digital, because everybody else had gone digital. And basically, we're getting it painted in Korea, and they said, you you're the only characters doing it now, and we don't want to do it anymore because we can't hire anybody. Well, I don't want to sell paint.
We ran out of paint.
That. We're done with that. And they started sending things with deliberate mistakes. I'm convinced they were deliberate mistakes. You know, things like, okay, we're going to truck from a 12 field to a 6 field. It's gone out of focus. You know better than that. Oh, yeah, the cameraman, he's gone on to digital. Yeah, that's it. It's a rookie cameraman. I think they're buying it. And, you know, so we were kind of, you know, eventually had to go there. But it occurred to me, it's like, wow, we've been doing this. This almost feels like a 19th century technology that we're doing, you know, sort of cloistered away.
I don't think we're there yet. I was just thinking at Paramount, I'm working on the SpongeBob feature, and I don't know if you guys get that, but we're looking at the big screen, right, and looking at color. And I'm like, wow, the color looks off. They go, no, don't look at that screen. Look over at this one. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, it's a little tinier screen. I'm like, oh, so I look at this for color, and that for... So it seems like something that's maybe still evolving. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to get on a soapbox for a moment here, if you will indulge me. I actually think it's kind of cool that no matter where each of us have wound up, whether it's hand-drawn or stop motion or computer animation, all of us had 2D in our history. All of us did hand-drawn films at one point or another, because we needed to know those principles. We absolutely needed to know those principles. I've gone to a lot of schools, you know, and seen that they don't teach people the hand-drawn principles, and their films are not as strong as those schools that do teach it. So as far as my advice is, never ignore the technology, but don't forget all it took to get it there.
Yep.
End of soapbox.
So anybody else on the technology question and dealing with change?
Yeah, I think it's an incredible time for animation and also one of the worst times. The films, the industry has never been more successful in feature films. CG is the only way they're being made in this country. The budgets are so high that I don't think people can afford to take any risks. So to make a great film within these parameters of being very commercial, you know, having to make a blockbuster every time, it puts an unhealthy pressure on the creators. You know, I just see it, I think it's going to explode. Somebody's going to do something different that'll break through, that will be a lot less expensive. I mean, Chris Meledandri did it with his first Despicable Me. He was able to have the animation done in France at a much lower price, like, oh my God, look what they can do. But he ultimately bankrupted that studio and had to buy it, and his budgets went back up. I just think that it's become very, very risk averse, and you know, I can't imagine another Fantasia being made now. Even though the attention span of your average 12-year-old is about, you know, 3 minutes. So I'm hopeful that there'll be either a breakthrough or one of the big studios will have a big flop and force them to try something different, smaller. But right now, I just see that the pressure on the filmmakers is so intense to be successful at such a high level that I think it stifles a lot of the creativity.
So how do you relate that to someone who is where you were when you made your student film? What advice do you give them as far as, okay, this is what's going on now, this is what you need to survive it, or?
Unless you're a natural fit, unless what you're doing as a student, you'd have to be very good at it. And if you're a natural fit at one of the studios, I mean, they all have their own culture. They're not exactly the same, but they have similarities. But if you're not a natural fit, I would look to new media. I think that not everything needs to be on a big movie screen. Everybody's got a big screen at home. I think in the way David Fincher brought remade an English TV series, House of Cards, live action, and Netflix produced it. the first original production of Netflix, it's a huge success. It's very well done. It brought all these viewers to Netflix. I know Amazon's doing an animated series for kids. There's all these other avenues, and it's a new frontier. So it's not like a clear, easy path, but I would say that consider looking at all the other options that are emerging right now. I think it's super hopeful. And you know, you can get anything on YouTube there's a lot of reasons things get successful on YouTube, but sometimes it's because they're good. And you know, so you do a student short film and it gets out there and it gets a lot of hits. That gives you a much better chance to continue being who you are, doing what you naturally are good at, than, okay, yeah, that's pretty clever, but come to our studio and you have to learn to do it our style.
I would say for anyone making their own short film too, is to do what you want to do. Like, this is the chance for you to do. Don't make it so you can get into Pixar or DreamWorks or tailor it towards what your mom wants or anything. Do what, like, it's your chance to really express yourself, which it looks like that's what all these films, all of our films are kind of doing at the time, expressing like really the style and what we are interested in. And I would encourage anyone doing their own short film, you're paying for it yourself, so you should do whatever you want to do.
Right. The other thing I'd say too is the good thing about, on the upside of technology, is it took a long time for me to finish my film because I had it painted on cells, and I even inked it because I couldn't afford to do xerography of the lines.
Do they know what cells are?
I don't think so. They're playing along.
Yeah.
The point is, I could have made that film in a much shorter time. It took me over the course of like 4 or 5 years to finish it, just because of the amount of labor involved. But now all that labor part is squashed down. And that's a good part, because you have more time to express your creativity and your storytelling, and a lot of mechanical things you can do. And that part of the technology is only going to get better, faster, and more portable. And that's sort of the good news. And I think, too, what you're saying is that you could do even maybe a feature that could be done for less of a price, because this technology will get more affordable and collapse. And there'll be other programs that you can utilize and spend more time being creative than sort of the mechanical difficulties and the pitfalls.
I think it's interesting always to kind of look 10 years ahead. Because people always tend to think that the way things are is the way they're going to continue to be, and it seems like that isn't the way it ever is. I mean, and without making any big predictions, I feel safe in predicting that 10 years from now, things will be somewhat different than they are now. And
no,
you can sort of be a part of that or not, but things kind of move through all the different cycles, and it's always interesting, and things come out of left field, things you don't expect, and suddenly everything changes, and it's like, whoa, what happened? And then there's new trends and new things. So I think the future is really interesting. We'll hold a lot of new possibilities.
The other thing maybe to say, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but in the long run, tenacity trumps talent. That if you are really talented but you give up and go away, nobody's going to see it. But in the long run, if you are doggedly determined to do what you're going to do, you're going to get better because you want to. And this is a business that takes 5 years to make a movie, so you got to be in it for the long haul.
You got to be crazy to do this.
You do.
We're all a little mad.
So what are some of the changes that you encountered as you were going along, and that how did you solve those issues? What are some of your problem-solving techniques when you get stuck, I guess is what I'm asking.
You mean creatively or
Yes.
technologically?
Both.
I think one of the tricks that we use all the time is just list making. That, as a kid, I always felt like there was one great idea that would be the answer. And now you realize there's like thousands of ideas, most of which are lousy, but some of them might turn into something good. So you just keep pushing yourself beyond just the one idea at the beginning. So that's one.
The animation draws you in. It draws you in close. And one of the things I'm trying to do lately is that when you first come onto a project, the list-making thing for me is to write down what do you want this to be? Like, and before you get into any of the details of the story, like, oh, I want it to be fun in the beginning, but emotional at the end, and I want people to feel this way, and I want to feel this way. And you write down all these things, and we put those away. And sometimes when you're so stuck, you back away and open that little file up, and it can be something you just remember a conversation, and you'll be at dinner, and you're like, remember when we started this? Didn't we want this to be this, this, and this? And you're like, yeah. And you need to back up and look at it as a big picture again. And there are so many people along the way that will help you do that, you know. But so many times I'm dwelling on something this close, you know. And and I realized when you back up, like, oh, I'm bumping against a tree. I should just be moving around it. That was just sort of silly. But I think that keeping your eye on keeping your eye on the big picture, I think, and finding a way to not forget what you wanted in the very beginning. But definitely sometimes you have to back up and.
Yeah, I agree. You get buried in the work and blinded by detail. You know, an old trick for looking at a painting or drawing or something you've created in 2D is put up a mirror and look at it in a mirror, and it's like shocking how you'll see it brand new for a short amount of time. That's harder to do with filmmaking, but you know, bringing in outside eyes, someone to bring you back to the big picture is essential, because animation is so work intensive. You get eaten alive by details. So yeah, it's a great observation.
I find that the beginning of a project is very fun because it's something new and it's something exciting and there's all these new ideas. And maybe the last year of the project is kind of exciting in a different way because it actually is becoming a reality, and you see it all actually happening. The middle, which can be several years sometimes, can be tough, and it's tough to keep objectivity, and it really is tough. You can lose your perspective, and I do think that helps to sort of, in the early stage when you are really excited, to sort of keep track of what it is that is getting you excited, and trying to keep that freshness in your own head as you make it through that middle.
Yeah, you know, one thing I would say is that with today's technology, you can do practically anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should. I think that you still have to employ smart filmmaking in your staging, in your characterizations, in the complexity of your scenes. You still have to tell the story well without saying, hey, I can have 658 extras, you know, in the background walking around here. Why? Why do you need it? You know, if it doesn't help tell the story, why do you need it? And I think that's something that's very easy to forget as the technology gets more and more advanced.
I find myself, as I mature as a filmmaker, going back to personal experience a lot of the time. I look at a problem and I say, well, is there anything in this problem that I've experienced? Is there any truth that I can draw upon to make it real, to make it land in a deeper way? Don't go to, you know, the touchstone animated films that I love.
Or
is there
Star
something
Wars.
in life that I can...
Star Wars all the time.
Or Star Wars. Is there something in life?
I was trying to make it
that
through one day without reference to Star Wars, Pete. You just ruined it.
All right.
I can't get through one day. I went to the beach the other day, and I was like, oh, we're almost to the end of the day. No one's out here. Some guy walks by, and he goes, looks like Tatooine, man, out here. One day. I want one day.
Yep.
I love the movie, by the way.
Yes, of course.
I just won one day without talking about it.
I've never seen it.
That's a movie.
What?
So talk about, was there someone in your path to getting here that was a mentor, and how did they find you, or how did you find them, and what was that process like, and what did it do for you?
I was lucky enough to have a couple people, like I mentioned, in that studio growing up. There's this guy named Bill Barter who I sat with, and he taught me basics. Along the way, I got to meet Joe Grant, who was amazing to just pick his brain and talk to him about what was important to him in crafting the story of Dumbo and Fantasia and all these great films that he was affiliated with. And it really broadens your mind because you love these films, and to think of somebody making them kind of broke my brain a little bit, because they feel like they've always been there to me, you know? They're just so great. It's like somebody from God handed them down, and I don't know. So thinking about the process of making them in the same way that we're doing, you know, and struggling with the same things that we struggle with. I mean, Joe used to say, really not much has changed, you know? It's the same problems. What are you giving the audience to take home? It was something that he would phrase it as like, what emotionally is this story conveying to the audience that that will resonate with them? So that was a big...
For me, it was Frank Thomas. That I worked with Frank for a couple years. He was my mentor, and I was an animator working with him. And he asked me to work with him, so that was cool. And Frank is probably among animators, I think, is probably one of the greatest actors of any animators. And he struggled with his drawing, as I did, so we related to each other in that way. And it amazed me that he struggled, and it amazed me that he was kind of got frustrated sometimes with what he was doing. And in my mind, it seems like, how can you possibly get frustrated? Everything you do is sort of perfect and is a gem. But he really stressed acting and the importance of what the character is thinking and what's unique about the character, and the way the characters relate with each other and contrast with each other, and how to show that. And it was just a really great privilege to just sort of go in his office every day during that time and try to be a sponge and glean what you can, because you realize it's a kind of a special time. But certainly he was a huge influence on me, and just in terms of thinking, just the way he approached things and the way he thought about things was illuminating.
Mine was Richard Williams. He of Roger Rabbit fame, and prior to Roger Rabbit, he'd been doing television commercials and things like that. And he was tireless in extracting information from, you know, wonderful classic cartoons and giving it, you know, to the people who were working for him. And I learned so much from him. The other thing I learned from Dick was a very unique sense of graphics in movement, in that doing TV commercials, you're often called upon to do things in a myriad of different styles. You know, one week it's Tom and Jerry, the next week it's woodcuts, the next week it's fashion drawings. And Dick would animate anything well, and he instilled that in us as well. It doesn't matter what graphic style it is, it can still have the same great principles of acting, timing, staging, no matter what style you're doing. So he was great that way.
For me, it was someone who has nothing to do with animation. When I was 14, I think I said earlier, I became an apprentice at the Puppet Workshop in Rhode Island. I became a puppeteer. And I was really taught by this gentleman named Mark Kohler, who instilled in me the joy of storytelling, really, that spark at a really young age. And I think what I came away with most of all was that every day should be play. You should find a way to make it fun, and I find that's my struggle now, is really how do I reattach to that 14-year-old and have that joy of being in the moment telling stories. So I have a lot.
I don't know if it's a mentor, but like I said, the community at Cal Arts was really cool. Just to be around a whole bunch of different artists doing their own style was really inspiring. And then my parents were completely encouraged. I'm sure all of our parents here did. Completely encouraged what we're doing. Like, gave me art supplies and you know, encouraged me. And they weren't artists. I'm from, like I said, from Oklahoma, and never discouraged anything I was into or wanted to do. With exception, I did go through a stage where I was drawing devils a lot, and we were in church, and my mom was like, "Don't draw yourself." That's the only time she like said no to artwork, but super encouraging.
Yeah, I'd have to second that. I think that that my immediate family was so encouraging of everything I was doing. And there was a period of time I had a little Underwood typewriter that like had a ribbon that was like from like 1901, and there was barely any ink on it. I'd bang out these little stories on this typewriter. And they were short stories that were all about misfortune and disaster, and they were really dark. But I would type them out and I'd bring them upstairs and like, this is great, Chris. Do another one. But I've read them since, and they're really kind of frightening little stories, kind of terrifying and stuff. And so my parents, and they were like, no matter what I did, they're like, this is great, do more, you know. And but also like a lot of my teachers, I never really, and this is just, I think, just the luck of the draw for me. I never met any of the art teachers in my life. I never met some art teachers that were really into what I was doing, and I couldn't really find like cartooning and stuff like that. I couldn't find anybody that knew much about that. But surprisingly, it was other teachers in the Colorado school system that encouraged me. Like my Lang arts teacher, Cheryl Jones, in high school, she was like, well, you don't write so well, but I'm going to let you be the cartoonist in the school newspaper. So I had that encouragement and that outlet. And one of my high school, one of my junior high band teachers, I played saxophone. And he let me do cartoons for their publications, and he did a little art show for me and stuff like that. So a lot of the teachers in my life actually like really supported what I was doing and showed a lot of interest when I couldn't find it in other places.
I'll just mention a couple of people. When I was really young, I was drawing all the time and pretty good for a third grader. The principal at my grammar school, recognized this and hooked me up with a local illustrator, this pretty famous guy named Stanley Meltzoff. This is in a time when they were still doing a lot of paintings for National Geographic. There was a series in Life magazine, which was a big deal back then, on the Civil War. Stanley was the guy doing those paintings. So once a week I'd go to his house after school. He had a real studio, like a Renaissance artist. If he needed to paint a dead horse, there was a dead horse there hanging from a chain. There were models. He was like the real deal, and I'm this little squirt, like, what do I do? And he would just sort of come over and encourage me, and I'd draw my animals and draw what I was doing. So that was, Stanley was a huge influence to see how one artist, the classic tradition of great painters, how they work. CalArts, I was in both the character animation program and experimental animation program. In the experimental, the head of that department was this guy, Jules Engel. Jules exposed me to world animation. So we saw the classic Disney shorts, but I saw things from Poland, Eastern Europe, from Belgium. I got a sense of what else is going on, and it wasn't all funny cartoons. There was serious political statements, darkly humorous things, many different techniques. I ended up coming to Disney and getting a job, and then my third, very critical, to survive. Well, there was basically I was a fish out of water because everybody else I was working with there had dreamed their whole lives of working at Disney and could draw the characters and understood the principles. And I was doing like New Yorker cartoons that came to life. Things that made sense in a certain world, but not at Disney. Actually, I'll mention Glenn Keane because he had gone to CalArts right before me. He took me under his wing and he got me to draw rough. He got me to explore and understand the principles of what the hell Disney animation really is about. So Glenn, who draws like Michelangelo, is one of the greatest artists who's ever worked in animation, was the third mentor for me.
In many ways, my first mentor in animation was Eric Goldberg. We met in 1974 at a Kodak Movie Award competition, for a Teenage Movie Award competition, when we both won in it, and they placed us together. They had the event at the Plaza Hotel. I guess it was when Kodak had a lot of money back then.
We were roomies.
Yeah, and we were roommates. And Eric's work was like phenomenal. It was For Sale was in there, and I was like, wow, this is really great stuff. And so Eric really, we became very good friends, and Eric encouraged me, and yeah, he was like my first mentor. And I would say the other one that comes to mind was I was very fortunate to get to know and become very friendly with Bill Scott, who was, I'm sure many of you know, was the co-creator of The Bullwinkle Show, and, you know, wrote a lot of the material and did several voices. It was sort of actually interesting for him because that was a later part of his career, was doing these voices. But he was very encouraging. It was helpful. It wasn't specifics, but just encouraged. He said something once to me. He said, "David, a lot of people draw well, but you draw funny." I think that's a good thing. So, he was a great guy, and it's a real pity. Bill sadly died at the age of 65, before the real renaissance of animation came about, and I wish he got the chance to see that. He would have been very happy.
I'd have to, I think one of the most pivotal mentors in my early experience was at CalArts was our color and design teacher, Bill Moore. It was one of those rare classes and rare teachers that comes along that literally changes fundamentally how you look at the world. The language of color theory and design and the principles of design were utterly new to me. I had never heard any of this stuff before, and it just, you know, blew the top of my head off and affected the way I watched movies. It affected the way I arranged furniture in my room. Suddenly, you know, it was like seeing the world through a different set of eyes. And believe it, the sort of twin pillars of my experience at CalArts would be represented by Bill Moore, and then our caricature teacher, T. He, who just had this wonderful sort of off-center vision and wonderful sense of whimsy and humor. And he would sit down with me and painstakingly go over all my storyboard panels that I had drawn and just suggest little tiny tweaks, you know, changing the angle on something this much, changing the expression this much, just to add more interest, more humor, more whimsy. And I remember T always emphasized, you know, teaching us ways to kind of shake up what we were doing and kind of clear away the cobwebs and look at what we were doing in a fresh way. He would encourage us to, like, draw upside down with our left hands, or if you walked a certain way to school one day, walk a different way the next day. And I just loved him for that. He was just a really wonderful and special human being. So I would have to say Bill Moore and T. He.
So I have a couple of questions from the Academy's Twitter and Facebook followers I want to bring to you. Matt Campana has asked, what do you do currently to keep yourself creatively fresh, and how has that changed over the years? Anybody have any creatively fresh secrets?
Well, I mean, you're always looking for new stuff to be inspired by, right? And it comes from anywhere. Comic books, I'm taking banjo lessons. You know, just, you never know where you're going to get ideas from. So
yeah, I think Pete makes a really good point. Keep yourself open to things other than animation and other than film, and go out and seek experiences in the real non-animation, non-film world. You know, walk your dog, go to the beach. You know,
I hang out with my kids.
Hang out with your kids.
6 and 8.
Hang out with his kids.
They're not jaded. No, don't hang out with my kids. Is that what you said? I hang out with my kids.
No, I think that's really smart. Like, I do other things. I do something else, but don't do one thing all the time, because yeah, you'll become sort of I think blurry to it and stuff like that. Do your own drawings, right? Write other stories, because you know what, like, not every story has to be a giant feature film. Like, do a little short story sometime and just like illustrate it or something like that, or commit something to video like right away with your little video camera or something like that. Get away from what you're doing once in a while.
I think the same way you have to look away from your screen constantly to keep your mind together. I think the same thing with life is you got to look away from what you see every day.
Yeah.
And plant yourself in situations that maybe aren't the most comfortable for you to be in. You know, go on a trip somewhere, go by yourself, you know, figure it out, interact with people you don't know.
Well, I used to think it was all about draftsmanship and technique, and if I could just draw the right way, then I would be great. And what you realize is any art form, the art is a reflection of the person inside. So what you really have to be focused on is who you are and what you're doing with your life. The way you think and the way you interact with other people is really key.
That's the thing too, interacting with other people, right? And getting away from the screen.
You know, be brave. Be brave enough to go out and experience the world. I just did a little pitch for my wife's movie. Sorry about that.
Brave. I am.
My DNA.
There you go.
Oddly enough, whenever I'm working on a movie, I get into a period where I'm somewhere deep in the second act and I forget to go see other movies. And so it'll be like 6 months. I'm like, I haven't seen a movie for a while. I'll finally go to the theater. I'm like, movies are awesome. and as I'm watching the movie, I'm like, I know exactly what to do on mine now. even though the movie I'm watching has nothing to do with my film, there's something about the audacity and the grace and the pacing and the depth of these things that you're like, yeah, like that's what I should be doing on mine, you know?
The same thing happens if you don't watch TV for a long time. Like a car commercial is like, oh my God,
so
the
beautiful.
most amazing car commercial I've ever seen.
So exciting.
I would also add to that, read. Read everything you can get your hands on. Read the newspaper, read novels, read nonfiction. All of it's great, and all of it just refills the creative battery.
I remember hearing a story, I'd have to relook it up, but it was somebody was asking Johannes Brahms what he does to inspire his compositions, and he says, I read a lot. You know?
I find that no matter how mundane the assignment is, there is always a challenge in it. And I think that's how I keep fresh. It's the kind of thing, what in this haven't I done before? How do I solve this particular issue or set of issues? And when you're doing something you've never experienced before, that always keeps you fresh, because then you have to go through the learning and exploration process to actually find it out.
Next question here is from Pamela Kohler. It's, what are the biggest holes in the education of most young animators? What can students and beginning professionals do to fill in those gaps? So what are people not getting that they need when they come to you guys and they're starting out?
Depends on which students you're talking about.
Is there a trend anywhere that you see where that students are coming and not having, or let's try it a different way. What is, when you, obviously people think, if only Pete Docter would call me, I could have a career. Well, you're busy, right? So when you do have a student or a young professional that you're working with, what is it that gets your attention and that makes you kind of decide to mentor them? What is it that gets you to see something there that maybe, like your mentors saw something in you? What is it that you're looking for that gets you, or is it different in each case?
For me, it's I would have to say it boils down to the ability to convey a simple idea clearly. It's the ability to communicate.
Yeah, I always think it's that when I was looking at portfolios of people, it's like, oh, these characters have a real point of view, and they convey. You know, they convey emotion. They're not just, I'm a funny character. No, it's just like, oh, I see what that character is thinking, or what it wants, and so forth.
I think it sends a story. I think that I've seen a lot of different portfolios. I just came from the comic convention, and people will bring up little portfolios on iPads and things. And I'm like, my main note is no matter what you're doing, whether it is character design, layout, or if it's just you're making a little film, story, a sense of story is always what I think is going to hook me and hook people that look at it.
I'd like to echo that. We recently went to some animation schools in France, and the biggest note we had when we came out was these people have a certain ability, but the most important thing is, can you tell your story? Can you actually tell it in a way that people understand it and enjoy it and are entertained by it? And in many cases, they couldn't. I think the technique should be secondary to your ability to actually convey what it is you have in your head. And that involves the craft of storytelling as much as anything else. Knowing how to use the camera, knowing, what certain things in film grammar mean and why you would use them. That's what I find the most lacking these days.
Bill Moore at CalArts said, "You're not cartoonists, you're students of communication." And that stuck with me.
I also think a sense of entertainment is always good, and certainly animation and entertainment kind of go together, but it's even compared with live action, I think that there's a fun aspect to animation in almost every moment when an animated feature really works well. It's not, there's some films where you sort of go past the dull parts to get to the good parts, but if an animated film, for it to really work well, it's almost like every single moment has some sort of entertaining aspect to it to help kind of sustain it. It's tough to sustain a story for an hour and a half. That's probably one of the hardest things there is to do.
And on top of all the skills, what I like to see is someone who has ambition, someone who comes back a second time after you've talked to them and says, "What do you think? I'd made some changes and I'd really like to share them with you." That need to keep growing is someone that I want to invest in.
Okay. Well, I want to say a couple of things before we wrap up here. One is that the people in this room have a lot of brain power, and I'd love to see you all tackle the concept of digital preservation and keeping not only the films that we've screened snippets of here alive, which were shot on other media, but the digital formats, which are very quickly changing and are something that need a lot of attention. There's some careers to be made there, and they're probably in this room, the solutions. So I challenge you to that. Richard Williams will be at the Academy on October 4th with an exhibition, so hope if you're in Beverly Hills, you'll stop by for that. And I want to thank you, gentlemen, for making this a very informative and humorous and fun and engaging conversation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining.
This is the best part. We'd like to have a huge thank you, obviously, to our illustrious panel here. A special thank you to Alice Davis here, who gave permission for the Mark Davis Lecture Series. Thank you so much, Alice, for your blessing on this. We've got two big themes here, experience and experiment, and we've got a massive convention center full of all that for y'all right now. Thank you very much. Have a great week.